My world was not built of brick and mortar, but of melody and harmony, a fragile palace of sound that I, Elara Vance, composed one aching note at a time. He was the cornerstone of that palace. Julian. My husband, my muse, the brilliant producer who promised to conduct my heart's symphony for the world. For a decade, our life was a perfect, soaring composition. I would compose in a sun-drenched studio overlooking the city, my soul spilling onto sheet music in great, emotional waves, and he would transform my raw, tempestuous emotions into platinum records that topped charts and filled stadiums. Our magnum opus was Siren's Lament, a cello concerto that was my very essence distilled into sound, a piece of such profound vulnerability and beauty that finishing it felt like a sacred birth, a piece of my soul given permanent form. The night I played it for him on the grand piano, the notes trembling in the air between us, his tears were my greatest reward. "It's immortal, Elara," he'd whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "This will outlive us both. This is our legacy." I believed him with every fiber of my being. Then, the diagnosis came, a cruel, unexpected dissonance. A rare, degenerative neurological condition, a silent thief come to slowly, inexorably steal my fine motor control, my ability to play, to even write music clearly. The world became a muted, terrifying place. I retreated into myself, and Julian became my devoted caretaker, my rock. Or so I was meant to believe. The betrayal began not with a bang, but with a whisper. A dropped receipt for a private bank vault. A strange, fleeting expression on his face. A new password on his laptop. A cold dread began to crystallize in my gut. One afternoon, while he was out, I fought through the weakness in my hands to access his private files. What I found was a meticulously orchestrated composition of deceit. He had secretly copyrighted Siren's Lament, and my entire unpublished portfolio solely in his name. He had systematically transferred our shared assets into offshore accounts I could not touch. He had used my illness, my trust, my absolute vulnerability as the perfect cover to plunder my life's work. When I finally confronted him, the man I loved vanished. In his place stood a cold, polished stranger. "You're not well, Elara," he said, his voice clinical. "The stress is making you paranoid. I am simply protecting our future." The word, "our," was a profanity. He was erasing me and called it protection. The day the divorce papers arrived, citing my inability to contribute, I didn't shed a tear. I stood in the silence of my studio and made a vow. He had taken my music, my health, my partner. But he had left me with a storm inside. And from that storm, I would compose a final, devastating symphony of ruin and revelation. My body was a traitor, but my mind became a fortress of cold, sharpening focus. My revenge would be a quiet, patient, meticulously planned crescendo. I checked myself into a specialized clinic in Switzerland, funded by a small, hidden inheritance from my mother, the one thing he could not touch. This was a strategic retreat. My hands, which once danced across piano keys, now struggled to hold a pen. So I adapted. I became my own scribe. I dictated every note, every chord, every vengeful melody into a digital recorder for hours each day. My voice became my primary instrument. I composed a new piece, my masterpiece of vengeance. I called it the Judas Rhapsody. It was the dark, twisted inverse of Siren's Lament. I embedded the entire truth of our story into its musical DNA. The main melody was our wedding song, inverted into a sinister, mocking theme. A complex rhythm section mirrored the date of my diagnosis. The crashing finale was the sound of my heart shattering. It was a detailed, musical map of my betrayal. But the true masterpiece was more clever. I knew Julian's arrogance. He would need to bask in the glory of my stolen work. He would take Siren's Lament and present it as his own at the legendary Aurora Hall. That hall would become my stage. I reached out to the only soul I still trusted, Anya, a former prodigy turned reclusive tech genius. I poured out my story. She understood perfectly. Together, we devised our plan. She remotely infiltrated the Aurora Hall servers and embedded a secret audio file deep within their sound system, a digital sleeper agent, programmed to activate on the final note of Siren's Lament. A phantom in the wires, waiting to speak my truth. The final piece was a letter. I wrote it myself, my script a clumsy scrawl, every word a bullet. It detailed the theft and exploitation. I sent encrypted copies to every major critic and industry leader, timed for delivery the morning of the premiere. The trap was set. He was preparing for his coronation. I was composing the score for his execution. The night of the premiere, I was there. A shadow in a sea of glittering opulence. My walk was a careful, measured defiance. I sat in the last row, a phantom. Julian stood on stage, bathed in a golden spotlight that felt like a violation. He raised his baton. The orchestra began to play my Siren's Lament. It was an exquisite, soul-rending agony. To hear the deepest, most vulnerable parts of my soul, the music born from my absolute love for him, being conducted by the man who had coldly cannibalized it. Each soaring string section was a fresh cut, each weeping cello solo a twist of the knife. The audience was captivated, lost in the sublime beauty he had stolen. I simply watched, my heart a silent metronome of resolve. Then it arrived. The final, climactic, soaring note of the concerto, the pinnacle of his stolen glory. The moment it hung in the air, the sound system triggered. The hall did not fall into reverent silence. Instead, a new sound emerged, spreading through the stunned silence like a stain. It was my voice, raw and trembling, speaking clearly over the first, haunting bars of the Judas Rhapsody. "This is Elara Vance," my recorded voice echoed, a spectral announcement that froze the entire hall. And what you just heard was Siren's Lament, my heart, my soul, stolen by the man who stands on that stage. Julian froze. His baton, poised for a triumphant flourish, remained suspended. The color drained from his face, leaving a ghastly mask of pure terror. As my voice continued, explaining the inverted wedding song, the rhythmic code of my diagnosis, the music of the Judas Rhapsody swelled, telling the true, ugly story of his betrayal. The audience gasped, a collective, sharp intake of breath. I stood. Slowly. Deliberately. All eyes turned to me, the ghost made flesh. I walked slowly, painfully, down the grand aisle, my gaze locked on his. "You told me my music was immortal, Julian," I said, my real voice cutting through the thick silence. "You were right, but you're not." The chaos was immediate, absolute, and merciless. Journalists received their damning letters. Board members read them, their faces hardening with disgust. From the sound booth, Anya played the full, devastating Judas Rhapsody, a public, musical autopsy of his deceit. His triumph, his stolen legacy, imploded in a single, catastrophic moment. He was ruined. Professionally, financially, socially, completely. The subsequent legal battles returned everything to me, the copyrights, the money, my name, my dignity. I did not take it back with joy, but with a profound, bone-deep, clean peace. He had tried to silence my voice, but his arrogance gave it the grandest stage. My body remains broken, but my spirit had sung its most powerful, honest song, and the world was forced to listen. The aftermath was a symphony of consequence. My story became a cultural tempest, a debate about artistic ownership and exploitation. The legal victory was swift and total. The courts voided his fraudulent claims. Siren's Lament and my portfolio were returned to me. But the true restitution was watching his empire crumble. He was fired. His awards were tarnished. He became a pariah, a ghost in the industry. I, however, did not fade away. The notoriety forged a new path. With Anya as my partner, we established a revolutionary studio. We developed a system where my dictated compositions were translated into scores through AI and software. My physical weakness became my strength. I was pure, unfiltered intention. The Judas Rhapsody was released. I donated all proceeds to charity. It became an anthem of resilience. I was hailed as a revolutionary force. I received thousands of letters from people inspired to reclaim their own voices. That was the true victory. It wasn't about his destruction. It was about my reconstruction. It was about proving a silenced voice can return with a power that shakes the world. Julian sent one final, handwritten letter, full of self-pity and pleas for forgiveness. I read it once, then burned it. I felt nothing for him. Just a vast, peaceful space where his memory used to be. Forgiveness was a luxury I did not need. My peace came from my work, from my rebuilt life. I still live with my condition. The tremors persist. But now, when I look at my hands, I do not see only weakness. I see the hands that held the pen that brought down a king. My music is different now. It has shadows, but also a terrifying, luminous strength. It is music that has stared into darkness and learned to sing back with a voice that can shatter glass. And as I sit here now in my new, bright studio, the endless city lights twinkling below me like a vast blanket of hopeful stars, I know this to be the most profound truth of my life. He thought he was stealing my legacy. But in his blinding greed and arrogance, he only forced me to create a greater, more powerful, more enduring one. He tried so desperately to compose my ending, to write finest to my story, but he only succeeded in giving me the most powerful, courageous, and beautiful opening movement of my life's true, unending, and now completely my own, symphony. The Siren's Lament was never a song of loss. It was a warning, a promise, a seed. And the world, at long last, is finally, truly listening. My days are now filled with a purpose that is entirely my own. The studio I share with Anya is a hub of quiet, focused energy, a world away from the dramatic, emotion-charged space I once shared with Julian. Here, the tools are different. Banks of servers hum where grand pianos once stood. Large screens display cascading waterfalls of musical notation generated from the cadence of my voice and the intricate emotional maps I dictate. Anya has become the interpreter of my soul's new language, her code translating my abstract yearning into concrete, playable parts for orchestras around the globe. We have created a new grammar of composition, one where the tremor in my voice is not a flaw but a nuance, where the pause I take to find a word becomes a perfectly placed rest that heightens the tension in a string section. The music that flows from me now is bolder, more complex, and fearlessly emotional. It does not shy away from darkness or dissonance, but it always moves toward a resolution that is earned, not facile. It is music that acknowledges the storm but has built a steadfast shelter within it. I have written concertos for holographic instruments, scores for virtual reality experiences that allow the listener to step inside the very architecture of a melody, and simple, piercingly beautiful piano pieces that are played by musicians who now contact me not for Julian's sake, but for mine. They speak of the Vance signature, a quality of raw, uncompromising truth that cannot be faked. My physical limitations remain, a constant companion. Some mornings, the simple act of holding a cup of tea is a monumental effort. The frustration is a low, persistent hum in the background of my life. But it is no longer the main theme. I have learned to work with my body, not against it. I use voice-activated software for everything. I have a custom-designed chair that supports me during long creative sessions. I have accepted that the connection between my mind and my hands is now a long-distance call, filtered through technology and the faithful partnership of Anya. This acceptance is not defeat, it is a strategic alliance with reality. Occasionally, I hear whispers of Julian. He moved to another country, tried to start over under a different name in a different corner of the industry. But the scandal was too global, the digital footprint of his downfall too permanent. He is a cautionary tale, a footnote in articles about my work. I feel no schadenfreude. His existence is simply irrelevant to my own. The space he occupied in my heart and my life has been renovated, filled with new collaborations, new friendships, and a quiet, steady love for the woman I have fought to become. The world may remember me as the woman who orchestrated the ruin of Julian, but I am determined that my ultimate legacy will be the music I created after he was gone. The music of survival, of alchemy, of turning the lead of betrayal into the gold of a life lived entirely on one's own terms. My body remains a broken, unreliable instrument. But my spirit, my creative fire, my core, it had sung its most powerful, most breathtaking, most honest song. And he and the entire world was forced to sit in silence and listen.